Hi, everyone. Good morning or good evening, depending where you're joining us from. Welcome and thank you for being here. Thank you to the attendees and especially to the speakers. My name is Elena Tacchini and I'm the Advocacy and Communication Officer of Diaspora in Action for Human Rights and Democracy, which organized the webinar. We are a diaspora-led foundation that documents hate speech and associated human rights violations in India. We are very pleased to have with us the speakers, Anna Van Dyck from Human Rights Foundation, Dr.Banojyotsna Lahiri from SPECT Research Association, and journalist Betwa Sharma from Article 14. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our co-founder, Dr. Ritum Brahmanovi, who will be moderating the conversation. So before we start, just a heads up that attendees are muted for the moment, but we'll have a Q&A, so always please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or to raise your hand, and then I will unmute at the end of the conversation when we'll have space for comments and questions. And the webinar is recorded. I will start with the introduction of the speakers before handing the mic to Ritu. We have here Dr. Banojyotsna Lahiri, academic and activist based in New Delhi. She did her PhD from Jalala University and her work engaged with issues such as hate crime, lynchings, equal citizenships, and the rights of political prisoners in India. She currently serves as the head of research at SPECT Research Association, a think tank based in Delhi. Hannah Van Dyck is a legal researcher officer at Human Rights Foundation, and she works on legal petition for the Human United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, and manages Human Rights Foundation research projects that monitors political freedom and regime development globally. And Betwa Sharma is the managing director of Article 14. She was previously the politics editor at Huffington Post India and the New York United Nations correspondent for the Press Trust of India, and our co-founder and executive director, Dr. Ritum Brahmanovi. So thank you all of us again for joining us. I will hand the mic to Ritu, and then we'll be here to monitor the chat for any questions.
Thanks a lot, Elena, and really grateful to all the speakers for joining us today for this panel, and also to HRF for co-organizing this for us with us. I think we have much to discuss in this 1-hour webinar, so I will, without much ado, get started with my very first question, and I want to direct this to you, Betwa, because you have extensively covered the Delhi riots, during the February 2020. We all know what happened, and your reporting on this was phenomenal. Could you explain for our audience and set a stage for them that what happened in Delhi in February 2020 and how this ended up becoming a larger conspiracy case?
Well, thank you so much for having me. So there is some ground to cover here. So this is going to take a few minutes. So in February 2020, Delhi saw communal riots during the protests against a controversial citizenship law, the CAA, or the Citizenship Amendment Act. And I think it's important to understand what the protests were about before we get into the riots. Now, given the extreme rise of Islamophobia since the BJP government came to power in 2014, and the Home Minister kept saying that there would be a nationwide survey to determine citizenship, Indian Muslims felt that the law and the survey would be used to question their citizenship, especially those who could not produce the right documents. Or at the very least, it could become a tool of harassment. Now, the government position was that the Indian citizens had nothing to fear, and that the activists were misleading Muslims and fear-mongering. In any case, that is what the protests were essentially about, calling for the repeal of the law in this climate of growing Islamophobia and routine violence and lynching of Muslims. It was mainly led by Muslim students and activists. Muslim women, especially homemakers, became the face of the movement. But it was attended by many people across the board who, Hindus, Muslims, who did not like the direction in which the country was heading under the BJP and Prime Minister Modi. And actually, the protests were a huge success. And they spread across cities, and there was an almost carnival-like atmosphere to them for a long time. And they pretty much stunned the government, stunned the Modi government, which had been cracking down on dissent, free speech, free press, protests, journalists, activists since coming to power. And here was this community which was most beaten down, and the government felt assured that they had sort of put them in their place, not only mounting the first organized movement since 2014, but actually having some success with it and sustaining despite all the vilification, especially in the mainstream media, which in India supports the state. But even with this whole carnival atmosphere going on, and it's spreading to different cities, 2 months in, the protesters were no closer to achieving their goal, which was basically getting the law repealed. And there was a certain amount of restlessness setting in, and it seems like they wanted, some form of escalation, basically taking to the streets and blocking roads when President Donald Trump was visiting Delhi in February 2020. The riots actually started with clashes between protesters for and against the law on 23rd February 2020. They went on for about 3 days. And as communal riots between Hindus and Muslims in India go, there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of bloodshed. Over 50 people were killed, hundreds were injured, uh, tremendous property damage. I think a telling fact is that the vast majority of those killed were Muslim, and almost all of the accused are also Muslim. So if this is indeed a conspiracy hatched by Muslims, it's a very strange conspiracy indeed, where they have ended up killing people from their own community. Now, I think it's also important to mention that a very serious allegation at that time was that the police was either complicit in the violence against targeting Muslims or simply did not show up to help them. Now, I'll talk about how this becomes the conspiracy case. Now, in the weeks after the riots, you have COVID also coming in. It seems that the state has decided to blame mostly the Muslim activists who were behind the protests for the riots. And their position was that the protests were actually a cover for planning the riots all along, and they decided Umar Khalid was the mastermind of the conspiracy. And this would be shown and prosecuted by hook or crook. So then they go about collecting scattered pieces of information of how the protests were organized, and collecting statements from anonymous witnesses to fit this predetermined narrative rather than investigating what actually happened on the ground. So now, as COVID sets in, some faces of the movement start getting arrested in the middle of the lockdown. Um, the police has actually never been able to explain why these people and not other people who were also organizing the protests, who have done exactly the similar things. So the police cannot explain that. So why them? Right? And if it were actually these protesters, in my opinion, the evidence in this case, as it stands so far, does not support it. So the accused end up being charge sheeted under the in India's counter-terrorism law, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which makes it very, very difficult to get bail. So while some of the accused have been released on bail earlier this year by the Supreme Court, after close to 6 years without a trial, Umar Khalid has not. Um, the Supreme Court has prima facie accepted the state's case against him. He is the mastermind, and said that he has to spend at least another year in jail, and told the state to move the proceedings along as quickly as possible. And I think that's where things stand at the moment.
Thanks a lot, Betwa, for this setting the scene for us on how the riots started and how the whole conspiracy narrative in the case was built up. I want to go to you, Banu, and I want you to basically talk about Umar, his story and his path to activism. Because Umar, as we know, is one of the person who's still in detention in this case, and what made him the target of the state. Betwa mentioned that he was seen as one of the key conspirators, or rather the key mobilizers. Can you walk us through the day of his arrest and what transpired on that day?
Yeah, so thank you, everyone, for first of all uh, inviting me and having me here. Betwa indeed gave a very strong and prolific background to the entire case. And like she mentioned, that Umar is said to be one of the mastermind. Now it's been 6 years since this case was put on us, on Umar and others, and we are still awaiting the trial to, substantiate how he is the mastermind. The evidences have not been put on for trial, and we are waiting. So the state's idea I cannot substantiate, because unfortunately, when we don't know what they think, because they never put this case for trial. I can tell you, as a close friend of Umar, that Umar has done his PhD from JNU, and in JNU itself, university, as a space, JNU is one of the very politically charged campuses even now, where there's a lot of debates, there's a lot of dissent that happens, and dissent there was always encouraged. As a university, our teachers, our seniors, our elders, our friends, our comrades, everyone encouraged questioning, and that was one of the primary things that this Modi government, right at the beginning of when it came to power, it tried to snub, because universities and the power of students to question everything and dissent at large was criminalized by this government, and first victim were the university spaces. So one after the other, university spaces were attacked, and in 2016 in particular, JNU was attacked, and there was a program which was held in JNU which was against capital punishment and the execution of Afzal Guru. That program was a very small cultural program, but that program was made into a pretext to clamp down not only on the university but on all university spaces. And it was said that, universities are basically where students waste taxpayers' money, and they in the name of decent, they ask very dangerous questions, questions that are dangerous to the sovereignty of the nation and anti-national. These are hubs of anti-national. So this became the backdrop of a narrative of clampdown, which then was extended to the entire country and all of us. And one more thing that started at that point of time in 2016 was media trial. Even that case, a sedition case, was put on some of the students. That case has not been put up on trial. It's been 10 years. That case has not been put up on trial. But there was a parallel media trial that was taking place, which declared all the students of JNU, and particularly Umar and a few others, as anti-national, which is not even a legal term. Like Hannah can corroborate, there's something called a criminal, which is legally defined in the IPC. What are your crimes? A set of things, if you do, you can be called a criminal. But what is an anti-national? Like, how can that be a legal term? But that became a legal term of criminalization of dissent and of attacking dissent. And from there on, Umar was particularly targeted. He was singled out because he was the only Muslim who was, the target. And fake news were peddled on national television about him. And that actually, at that point of time, it seemed like a storm. What we didn't know, that it's just the beginning. From 2016 till now, there had been occasionally, he became like, he's one of an university educated uh, Muslim student who was first time targeted. They thought that it might silence him. It might, silence him and Muslims like him into complete, intimidate him into silence. But that happened. That did not happen. He kept talking. He kept raising his voice. He became a face. A lot of youngsters, a lot of campuses started calling him to speak. on different things. He and some of us started an organization called United Against Hate, which was for the victims of mob lynchings that started from 2017-18 onwards. A series of cases of mob lynchings happened where, you know, Muslims and Dalits were lynched on the roads of India, and mob justice, it was called mob justice, but it was actually lynching that took place. And we were in touch with the victims to give them legal aid, to, you know, uh, to also to talk about these cases, because media by and large, and Betwa will tell you more about that later, maybe, that how mainstream media in this country has completely became the, you know, the propaganda machinery of the ruling class. The media first was complicit to the ruling class, and then they became hate mongers themselves. So by the time we reached this anti-CA protest, which that was already explained to you, such a law that first time seemed to all of us who upheld the constitution of the country as, you know, the first step towards apartheid. It's like the baby step towards apartheid, baby steps towards, you know, criminalizing uh, and targeting all Muslims. It seemed like that, and all of us raised our voices, and the protests were one of the most beautiful, peaceful, carnivalesque protests. And they talked about Gandhi, they talked about Nehru, they talked about the vision of India, they talked about the constitution. So much talk happened about the constitution of the country for the first time on the streets of the country. And that happened because of the anti-CAA protest. But then the Delhi riots took place. 53 people lost their lives, out of which majority, as Betwa said, were Muslims. 4 mosques were completely gutted. Okay, and also, most importantly, the riots were live streamed. We all saw what happened. But when the case came, we came to know that, uh, well, the anti-CA protesters uh, were responsible for the riots. And Umar, who was one of the faces of this protest, you know, he went and spoke to a lot of places where people invited him to gather, to address these gatherings that had spontaneously were happening in various places, as sit-in protests, where women-led protests. And Umar was called at a lot of places where he was constantly going and speaking. So was Sharjeel, so was Gulfisha, all the people who were ultimately arrested in this case as masterminds. All of them at some capacity were anti-CA protesters. Some were speaking about the protest, some were writing about the protest, some were organizing it locally, some were, you know, first-time protesters, but all of them were anti-CA protesters who were called the rioters. Like all the anti-CA protest sites of Northeast Delhi where the riots took place were gutted, were burned down. So it should be that the anti-CA protesters themselves had set to fire the protest that they were so fondly sitting for months, for peacefully sitting for months. So yeah, Umar was questioned twice by the Delhi police. If just the arrest part, I'll say 2 cases he was implicated in 2 cases. In one case, he didn't not just got he not just got bail. He was discharged. He was discharged of all charges in one riot-related case because they could not even put him up for trial in that case. But this other case, where he is called the mastermind, and which is the conspiracy case. I'll just tell you that around 700 FIRs were filed in the riots. One was turned into mastermind, into the conspiracy FIR, which is this FIR where Umar and others are implicated. So this is under the UAPA, the draconian UAPA, which makes bail so difficult because prima facie the charges are taken to be true, like we've already had said. So that's how. Even now, after 6 years, the courts have been forced to leave a lot of people. But Umar and Sharjeel, these 2 people, they have held back and said that they seem to be the mastermind. That they cannot prove it yet. It's been 6 years and they have not started the trial. And this is a pre-trial detention that is continuing, is for them to answer.
Thanks a lot, Banojyotsna. It is indeed quite a worrisome situation, and also you very poignantly pointed out that how the whole apparatus of the state was in some ways bent towards curtailing dissent from the Muslims and targeting Muslim youth leaders and people just having a discussion and discourse, students having discussions and discourse in JNU on some of the very controversial actions of Indian government. So Hana, I want to come to you because Banojyotsna basically left us at the point of where she talked about that Umar was detained and this is an arbitrary detention. And just to make this more make our audience more familiar to this term, I would like you to basically tell us from international legal terms, because you're an international lawyer, that what is arbitrary detention? How do you define it under international law, please?
So first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. I'm honored to be here, especially amongst such powerhouse women. So arbitrary detention in legal terms, it occurs when there is no valid legal basis for the arrest or when the detention follows from a fundamentally unfair process. So at HRF, we represent individuals who have been arbitrarily detained in what we identify as authoritarian countries. And so when we're looking at a case, we use a framework that was put forward by the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, UNGAD for short, because it's quite a long name. They have identified different categories of arbitrary detention. So I'll just walk through the most important ones, and then I'll set out how they apply to Umar's case. So the first category is detention is arbitrary when there is no valid legal basis. This can occur, for example, when a person is detained based on vague charges. So this is the case in Umar's case. He is charged 29 offenses total, but some of them are very vague and they've been recognized as being vague for quite some time. They include unlawful activities, terrorism under the UAPA, the India's anti-terror law. They also include sedition under the Indian Penal Code. So that's the first category. The second category is when detention follows from exercising fundamental rights. This can be the right to free expression or the right to peaceful assembly. This category is a little bit more less straightforward than the first one because it requires you to look at the full context of the case. So when we're looking at the case, we will look at things such as the profile of the person or the timing of the arrest or the conditions of the arrest and detention. So for example, when we're looking at Umar's case, the fact that right before he was arrested, he was so active in the protests and he himself was already a long time a known human rights offender. He was focusing on minority rights. And then the fact that then he was charged with so many vague offenses, all of these factors together, they indicate to us that the real reason for the arrest was that he was critical, that he was protesting. So that's this second category. And then the third main category that UNGAD has identified is detention is arbitrary when it follows from a fundamentally unfair legal process. So this can be that there is no access to a lawyer, that you are brought before a judge who is not impartial, that your process, your legal process is continuously delayed. So again, all of these factors are present in Umar's case, given that right after his arrest, he wasn't allowed access to a lawyer during the interrogations for, I think it was a total of 3 days. Then, his legal process on the merits still hasn't started. So that process has been unnecessarily and unreasonably delayed. So these are the three most important categories. And so HRF argued under all these categories that Umar's detention is arbitrary in these multiple ways. And yesterday, the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention published its decision on Umar's case, and they confirmed this. They confirmed that Umar's detention is arbitrary under international law in all of these different senses.
Thanks a lot, Hannah. This was quite interesting and also quite good for people who have been supporting Umar that, UNGAD has now issued this opinion that they had about the arbitrary detention of Umar. And we hope that this will move the Indian government to take the steps and especially the Indian courts to go in the right direction. Betwa, I want to come to you because, as Hannah said, that this detention is sort of arbitrary from an international legal standpoint, but you are there on the ground and you are also looking at the different conspiracies. So how do you see from your very ground information, the official narrative, and what's there on the ground, that how do you see the case of Umar and the charges against him?
So this is actually a pretty good place to start, because what actually happened on the ground during the riots has nothing to do with the conspiracy case, and I think that is the biggest weakness in the case. And I think Banu touched on this briefly. Like, there is no evidence that actually connects Khalid to any of the actual violence that unfolded on the ground during the riots. More than 700 cases, as Banu was mentioning, were registered in connection with the rioting. None of those link back to the conspiracy case, right? Um, Another telling fact is that Khalid has actually been discharged in the second case of the Delhi riots in which he has been made an accused. Right now, that is a case of localized violence and rioting. It's not like the overarching larger conspiracy case, as the Delhi police call it. Um, and as I said earlier, this case is based on scattered pieces of information, incidents, events, meetings, messages, and the things that go on while planning protests, right? And many of these things were actually posted about on Facebook and on WhatsApp groups. And these were groups with many, many, many members. There was nothing secretive about all of this, which was happening on the ground. Um, but the police have stitched them together in a way to paint that something sinister is going on. Like, they just say it. If they just say it and it's a completely innocuous thing, but it lands up in the charge sheet, it's a sinister thing. It's very strange. Like, they just have to say it to make it sinister, right? um and the strange thing is that many of these conspirators, like the alleged conspirators, they had certain connections between them. Some of them may have spoken to each other, but there are also people who've never spoken to each other, right? If they're hatching a conspiracy together, they're all from sort of different backgrounds, social and economic backgrounds, and some of them have spoken to each other or may have known each other, but none of them have, like, there's been no sort of, and this is also a problem because the conspiracy law itself is very confusing, right? So it can be stretched, and it just can be stretched around in such a strange way that you don't really know the rules for what constitutes a conspiracy. Does everyone have to know each other? And I'm speaking as a lay person here, right? But if I look at it as a, yeah, it's very strange to say that these 16 people hatched a conspiracy when many of them have not even spoken to each other. They have no connections with each other. They may have met once in a meeting. They actually have different, I mean, they may be all working for the same thing, same sort of same objective to get this law repealed, but they have their own styles. And and even within, when you're organizing such a large protest, right? I mean, there are different factors at play. People have disagreements. People want to do things their own way. And if you see the charge sheet, and if you see, if you look at the WhatsApp messages and all, and that really comes across. But all of this is somehow been made to look very sinister. And then the biggest thing which this case is actually built on are statements from anonymous witnesses. And because there is such weak evidence, right, they have used these statements from anonymous witnesses, where it's so difficult to check who's telling, because they all sound similar. They all start off in the same way. They all say the same things. And they've used this because they don't have any other kind of concrete evidence, physical evidence, forensic evidence, to affirm this sort of predetermined narrative that the Muslim activists and the anti-CA protests have to be blamed. So what you end up with, which I've written about also, is you end up with conjectures, inferences, and some fabrications as well. And I think the most telling example of this is that there is a conspiracy meeting which is alleged on 8th January 2020 between Khalid and two co-accused. Now, the defense has submitted that the call detail records show that they were never together in the same place at the same time that day. It doesn't end there. The witness for this meeting, who allegedly witnessed this meeting, has been thoroughly discredited by a trial court judge in the case in which Khalid was discharged. And yet, this witness and this meeting continues to be cited again and again by the prosecution in the conspiracy case, most lately before the Supreme Court. I'll give you another example. Now, the police had earlier claimed that this was a meeting, this 8th January meeting to plan the riots during Trump's visit, was taking into account that Trump was coming, right? But it later emerged that actually there was no public information about Trump's visit as early as 8th January, right? So they quietly then dropped this connection to Trump with regards to this particular meeting. A couple of other things. I hope I'm not taking up too much time. Let's talk about his speech, right? Khalid is the so-called mastermind of the riots, right? And the police have only one speech of his on the record, and it is a speech that calls for a peaceful protest. There is nothing remotely illegal or problematic about it. You can play it on, you can hear it online. I think it's still online. So that's the second thing which I wanted to point out. I just wanted to also touch on one more thing, which is that I think we need to talk a little bit. Okay, so he has been accused of terrorism under UAPA. Now the question is, does the UAPA even apply to this case? And you don't have to take my word for it. The Delhi High Court, while granting bail to two of his co-accused in 2021, said the UAPA didn't seem to apply to the crimes described here, because protesting government policy or law, or even aggressively protesting or organizing chakka jams and roadblocks as a form of protest, these are not acts of terrorism. And the High Court then went as far as saying that the police had blurred the line between protest and terrorist activity, right? And I think we don't give enough importance to this is absolutely momentous thing which happened, because it was the only honest moment from the judiciary. And they stated what was painfully obvious in this case in the last 6 years. But it was short lived because the police immediately challenged this in the Supreme Court, and they got a stay on the Delhi High Court's interpretation of the UAPA. And as I said earlier, UAPA also makes it very difficult to get bail. So Khalid, I think, has spent more than 5 years or close to 5.5 years in jail. The trial has not started. And finally, there isn't any real reason to believe that if he were released on bail, he could tamper with evidence or influence witnesses. So there's really no reason to keep him jailed in such a poorly evidenced case when the trial is not even in sight. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks a lot, Betwa. Very important thing that you mentioned, that this is first of all, there is no charge sheet in the current case, right? And there are frivolous charges of UAPA, etc., which has been used, but this is also not the first time that the government has done that, and this is also not the last time that the government has done that. And we have seen, for example, AFSPA charges for protesters in northeast part of the country. We have seen such use of draconian anti-terrorist legislations used, in an unjust fashion to curtail dissent. So, Banojyotsna, I want to come to you because I want to ask you about how this prolonged prosecution and denial of bail has shaped the landscape of Muslim activism in India today, and how does legislations like UAPA affect Muslim voices as well as dissent, and the political participation of the minority communities and Dalit communities and marginalized communities in political life and being.
Yeah, so see, the whole case was actually to teach the Muslims a lesson. Like the people who ultimately were charged for the riots, the people who were called for questioning, the people who were ultimately charged were overwhelmingly Muslims. okay, who were held responsible for a riot where majority of people who killed, like I said, were Muslims. So this was, in fact, a very straight, direct attack on the Muslims who had come out on the streets and actually led the most peaceful and the biggest civil disobedience movement since independence. And that is something that this government could not take. And therefore, there was this kind of attack. It intimidated a lot of people. It did intimidate. It is an intimidating thing that you were protesting and then you will go to jail uh, for 6 years without any trial. That in itself is an intimidating tactics, and it works. I cannot say that it doesn't work. The way university spaces like Jamia Millia Islamia or Aligarh Muslim University during this anti-CA protest, they saw brutal lathi charge and immense lathi charge on the students of Jamia and AMU both. And in Jamia, one student lost his eyesight, and a lot of students were injured and they were hospitalized, but not a single policeman were held accountable. That case did not, how did the police come inside a university campus and brutally lathi students like that, has gone unpunished? Has that entire incident has gone unpunished? Even the riots, the ones who actually set fire on the mosques, the one who climbed up to the mosques and tied saffron flags, we all saw those visuals. We saw the ones who burnt Muslim shops, Muslim owned shops. We saw incidents where people were killed and thrown into a canal. But justice has not been delivered there. What Who all are languishing in jail are the ones who peacefully protested. The policemen, there were visuals of policemen who stamped on a person, made him sing the national anthem over and over again, and killed him on camera. The case is still going on. The policemen are not yet punished. It's been more than 6 years. The ones who are languishing in jail, on the other hand, are the peaceful protesters. So yes, this is and see, these people, be it Umar Khalid, be it Khalid Saifi, be it Sharjeel, be it Gulfisha, these were also, activists of the community. In these last 6 years, there were so many cases of hate crimes. There were so many cases of bulldozers being run on people's homes, on people's shops, on people's business, targeting Muslims in particular, targeting Christians, targeting Dalits. Had they been out, they would have gone. And, like we did in United Against Hate. So by putting them in jail, they also impede the community action of people, of activists from within the Muslim community to stand in moments in distress. And they are also intimidating and trying to, send a message across to all the Muslims and the Dalits. And so that's an ongoing war of fascism. It's a battle of narrative. A lot of people also, across communities stand by Umar Sharjeel and all these people, and that kind of solidarities are also there. International solidarities have been forged, but overall, it's also definitely a message, very stern, cruel, brutal message that is being sent across to the Muslims in particular of this country.
Thanks a lot, Banojyotsna. I want to go to you, Hannah, and I want to talk to you because Human Rights Foundation has been involved in this case for some time, and Banojyotsna mentioned about also the international solidarity that is being formed around these cases. And as she mentioned, like Umar, Sharjeel, both of them are jailed. But from a legal research perspective, what makes Umar case particularly significant in the landscape of Delhi riot persecutions and national security laws?
So thank you. So when we were first assessing Umar's case, we found it to be a symbolic case, given that it's also emblematic of repressive trends that we've been seeing in India. So just to kind of zoom out a little bit and how we look at cases globally, we look at three main factors before we move forward with a case. We look for cases where there are strong indications that the person is detained for exercising their fundamental rights. That's the first one. But then we also look for cases that are, as I said, emblematic of a broader trend that's happening in the country or in the region. And then we also focus on cases that are symbolic in terms of if there were to be progress on this case, it would send a positive signal for the space of dissent in that country. So when we were assessing Umar's case, we found these three criteria to be present. First, given that Umar's case is representative of a shrinking space for dissent in India. So I'm a lawyer, I'm part of our impact litigation team, but we also just have a more political science project that focuses on analyzing tyranny in countries globally. And so as part of that project, we reclassified India from a democracy to what we call a hybrid authoritarian regime a few years ago, precisely because of this shrinking space for dissent. So that's one thing. Secondly, there are specific repressive tactics that we see in Umar's case in India, but that we also see in other cases of dissidents in India. So one is the use of the UAPA. If you're looking at across cases against dissidents, you will oftentimes see the same law being used. So in that sense, also Umar's case is emblematic of this broader trend of this UAPA being used in these ways to silence dissent. Secondly, there is this use of pretrial detention. It seems that Indian authorities are using this as a way to imprison dissidents without having to actually convict them. So again, it's a repressive tactic that we've been seeing across cases, and that also is applicable to Umar's case. And then thirdly, as Bruno also mentioned, Khalid is Muslim, and he's also advocating for minority rights and for marginalized communities. Also, this is a trend that we've been seeing under the Modi government, that there is this growing persecution and discriminatory policies against Muslims. So in all of these ways, we found that Umar's case is emblematic of repression that's occurring in India. But in addition to that, obviously, as also was flagged by Betwa and Bruno, there's multiple co-defendants in these cases. So why did we move forward with Umar's case? Because Umar is being profiled as this mastermind, as they call it, or a central figure in all of these cases. So our hope is that, if there were to be progress in Umar's case, this will have a ripple effect kind of on the other cases, and it will send a positive signal. In an ideal world, we would take all of the cases, but we have to be very selective given that we are a global organization. So we we thought that Umar's case could be reflective and could have this broader ripple effect if there were to be a positive development. So in short, Umar's case, we found it to be significant because it is reflective of these repressive trends, including the UAPA, pretrial detention, and this persecution of Muslims and minority voices in India.
Thanks a lot, Hannah. I want to ask a few final questions before I open the space for Q&A. And I want to ask again to Betwa, because you recently wrote an article on 5th January 2026 on how the Supreme Court's bail order against Umar Shirjil enables government's efforts to silence Muslim voices. And in this article, you argue that the Supreme Court's refusal to grant bail, despite the collapse of key prosecution claims, allows the state to punish Indian Muslim indefinitely and silence popular Muslim voices. Can you perhaps, walk us through and elaborate on this this argument? Because Banojyotsna also a while ago talked about that how UAPA has a sort of a chilling effect on the Muslim community. So I want to know from your experience and also from your reporting experience how this has impacted the Muslim voices.
Is Betwa there? I think she might have.
Oh,
She might have. Okay.
Yeah, no, she is here.
Yeah, she's back.
Sorry, I'm back. I just had a, internet glitch.
Betwa, I'm not sure if you heard my question, but I wanted to basically discuss a bit of your article that you wrote on 5th January 2026 on how the Supreme Court's bail order against Umar and Sharjeel enables government effort to silence Muslim voices. And now Banojyotsna has also spoken about already how the UAPA kind of makes this chilling effect amongst the community and changes the shape and landscape of activism which is there amongst the Muslim population. And since you are a journalist, you have your ear to the ground. We would like to know more if you can elaborate your argument from this article, and also how the silencing of Muslim voices is perhaps the bigger, Hindutva plan in that sense. So, floor is yours.
Well, I think this is the main motive. It is, as Banu said, it is to silence Muslims, it is to silence dissent, it is to silence protests, it is especially to silence protests that come from Muslims. I think that the government found this very, very galling, right? That because, there's been such a sustained movement, the rising Islamophobia, the vigilantes, the lynchings, and I think that they felt that that they had responded to this right wing desire to sort of put Muslims in their place, and suddenly you have this movement come up. So not only is it going against their sort of crackdown on our constitutional rights in terms of free speech and the right to protest and assemble, but it's actually coming from Muslims, this group which they felt that they had terrorized substantially over the last since coming to power. So I think, yes, I actually do think that the main motive is to silence Muslims. They have also sort of, if you think about it, just criminalized questioning the government, right? What this case is essentially saying is that if you question the government of the day, or if you question a law, or if you question policy, it is an attack on the country. So they're conflating the government with the country, and that's a very, very dangerous thing to happen. So if you're critical of the government, it makes you an anti-national, it makes you seditious, and it makes you a terrorist. Now, the UAPA makes it very difficult to get bail, but given that the legal proceedings are still at the stage of framing charges, the trial is not close to starting. The accused is not in a position to tamper with evidence or influence witnesses. There is no reason for bail to be granted. The Supreme Court's own jurisprudence on bail in UAPA cases has also been evolving, with some judges ruling that they need to release people on bail if pretrial detention is going on for a long time, or for years without a trial, because the right to a speedy trial is a fundamental right, and stringent bail conditions of the UAPA need to be balanced with the right to life and liberty under Article 21. So we have seen in the last few years evolution of that jurisprudence. The problem is that the application is very arbitrary, and it sort of changes from case to case depending on which judge is hearing the case. So in this case, in my view, despite the thin evidence, despite the fact that the police have given plenty of reasons to question the investigation and their motive, court after court has accepted the police case on merits. And for Khalid, they have rejected the defense's arguments on delay of trial, saying that the accused are only partly to blame, and that the delay is okay. There is a delay, but it's not a terrible delay at this point. They have rejected his arguments on parity with others who have got bail for the same alleged conspiracy. So like I said, it really comes down to the judges, because they can write a long order, and they can, I mean, these are all legal judicial experts, they can argue it both ways, right? They can justify giving bail, or they can justify not giving bail.
Betwa, I think we can't hear you anymore. Something.
Oh, let me just see.
Now we can hear you again.
Okay. Sorry. So I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I was saying that it's coming down to judges, because they can justify giving bail or they can justify not giving bail, however they please, right? I think the larger question of is also how much the judiciary allows the state to get away with, not just in terms of seeming bias in the police or the prosecution or the state, but just the poor quality of investigation and wasting the time of the court and making a mockery of the public and the taxpayers' money. I mean, 53 people were killed in these riots. Many more were injured. Right? This goes beyond Umar Khalid. 53 people were killed in these riots. Many more were injured. They, their families, and the public are owed an honest investigation. And if this was indeed a pre planned conspiracy, then we should be told who was responsible. And if it is the current set of accused, then come up with the evidence for it. So, if you don't have the evidence for it, in the absence of that, the clear message is that if any Muslim tries to do leadery or, questions government's policies, tries to organize protests, they will be punished irrespective of guilt, irrespective of the rule of law, irrespective of natural justice. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thanks a lot, Betwa. And indeed, it's a very important, relevant question that, there are people who have been injured, victimized, and now you are arresting people you don't have any evidence towards, and you are victimizing additionally more people. So what is the responsibility of the state here? And this also brings me to you, Hannah, being an international legal expert. What is the international legal responsibility over here? What can the international mechanisms do here? A few of us are joining this webinar from outside of India. And what is our role and responsibility in that sense as civil society organizers and mobilizers and activists over here? And then also keeping in mind that the rule of law is kind of in a very difficult situation right now. And Human Rights Foundation has been doing a very amazing work with the countries who have been declared as autocracies and the different mechanisms that you have been using. So I'm very curious for your response to this. That what is it that we can do as an international community on these issues?
Thank you, Ritu. There's a number of mechanisms that are available, but I can already preface it by saying that I think none of them are perfect. So this is, I think, where it's very important for civil society and other actors to come in and to support these mechanisms with advocacy, especially kind of over longer term. I think that's where civil society really has an important role to play, is to keep these cases visible over a longer period of time. But so at the international level, I think there's two important mechanisms that we can use. One being the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. This is an expert body that looks at cases of arbitrary detention across the world. What they can do is, in certain cases, they will issue opinions, somewhat like a court, but the main difference being that their opinions are not binding. So that's a weakness, I think, of the UNCAT. But obviously, these opinions do have a very important value in documenting and recognizing a situation. So in Umar Khalid's case, UNCAT issued an opinion, published their opinion yesterday. And I think the opinion has important value for external international community, because it confirms that what we all have been talking about on this call. It confirms to that external audience, okay, under international rules, independent international rules, there is no basis for detaining Omar. So I think in that sense, it has a very important value in documenting and recognizing a situation. And then again, I think these opinions are things that, again, civil society has to use and utilize to, again, raise attention, to go to policymakers, to go to these different external audits and say, okay, again, look, we have another recognition that this detention is arbitrary. So that's for the UNGAD. Another mechanism that we use in these cases, and we've also turned to for Umar's case, is special rapporteurs. They're also at the UN level. they are individual experts and they have a specific mandate. So you have special rapporteurs on peaceful assembly, you have special rapporteurs on human rights defenders. So also in Umar's case, we've turned to several of them. What they can do is they can send allegation letters to the Indian government to say, hey, we have received complaints, and here are all the human rights violations that we've noticed in this case, and they're asking the government to respond. Again, this is not binding in any way, but it's a way, again, we can exercise pressure and we can raise the visibility of the case. So at HRF, we think more of these mechanisms as things that we can use to bring attention. But again, it needs to be complemented with other advocacy. So some of the things that we do is we will use social media, we will use video, we will use press to just keep the case on the agenda. So none of these mechanisms alone will lead to a release. But I think when combined with civil society action, I think they can create pressure and they can help, hold governments accountable to the rules that they agree to on an international level.
Thanks a lot, Anna. Puno, I want to ask you, and I want to sort of also end my own questions and take the Q&A after that. But I want to ask you what keeps Umar resilient despite so many years of incarceration. It's been more than 2,000 days now. And perhaps you can throw us a ray of hope as well from his stories of resilience.
Well, see, Umar is a political activist, and he knows that this is a political targeting that's happening. I mean, so like Umar is very unapologetically a Muslim, but he is also unapologetically a Marxist. And as a Marxist, as an activist, we understand how this is a political targeting. This is absolutely a targeting by the ruling class of dissenting voices. Once you understand the politics, then this kind of then it's not so hopeless, because then it becomes then your survival within jail also becomes a battle in itself. And that's what he does. His other comrades also, who all have been attacked for their political beliefs, for dissent. That's what keep us going. Like, we know that this is not like they're not criminals. They're political prisoners who have been fighting for the rights of the people of this country, who are fighting for constitution of this country, who upheld the constitution. Like Betwa mentioned, the only piece of evidence that the police keeps circulating is a speech that was given not even in Delhi, in Maharashtra, 7 days before the riots even started, and a piece and the speech. If you type Umar Khalid Amravati speech on YouTube, you can find the full speech. It's still circulating. People still watch it. It has been played over and over again in the courts, in the Supreme Court, in the High Court, in the lower courts, where he gives explicit call for peace, where he says that we will not fight hate with hate. We'll fight hate with love. Will not respond to violence with violence. We must remain non-violent. Now, a speech where he explicitly says this cannot be a riot-inducing speech, right? One of the High Court judges, while denying him bail, said that, well, he did say Inqilab Zindabad, which literally translates into long live revolution. And that in itself is a call for terrorism. This is a part of a judgment. So you understand the politics of it. You understand why the witch hunting is happening. So therefore, he is not hopeless. Obviously, this entire process, such long delay, it distresses everyone. And he's a human being. It distresses him also. It stresses him out at times, but he reads a lot. He writes. He's writing inside jail. He has written almost 6-7 articles we have recently compiled his articles and articles written on him around this time, and we have already come out with an edited book. So he has written around 6 7 articles by now. He is working on other projects of writing, so he is engaging in the scholarly works that he was doing outside. He's not, I mean, inside also he's doing that. So that keeps him going. And most importantly, what keeps him going is when he reads about himself or about the case in the papers, or hears about other people are talking, and when other people talks and we tell uh, them in the court, or when we go and meet them in person in prison, that uh, these are these people talked about you, these webinars, seminars happened, a protest demonstration happened, a protest gathering happened, a meeting happened, and people talked about you. People send me messages all the time. My other inbox are full of messages from strangers, and somehow 99% messages somehow I get are messages of solidarity, messages of love, messages of hope. So that way it's like it really strengthens us as well as it strengthens him also, when I convey these messages of hope and the messages from all over the world, and webinars like this and seminars like this. The moment they hear Khalid bhai, Khalid Safi, or Umar Khalid or Shajil, when they hear that people did not forget us, people are talking about us, people are with us in this battle for justice, for struggle for democracy, then it strengthens us. Then it doesn't, you know, uh, it drowns us in despair. So yeah, that's what keeps all of us, including Umar, going. He's very strong. So don't worry about
That's really heartening to know. I hope some of that strength also transpires to all of us who are, around here, sometimes feeling despair on the situation in India and also in the rest of the world. So I hope, people also in our audience gain strength from the fact that, people like Umar in jail, they're still keeping very strong. I'm going to take the Q&A, or rather, I'm going to ask Elena to step in and take the Q&A, because I see a lot of them over here, but I think she might have done a better job in keeping track than I have. So Elena, if you can please possibly step in to take these questions.
Yeah, of course. If anyone has questions, please drop them in the chat. We have a question from Ritu with how people can help other than what Hannah mentioned. So how people can be of support for Umar's case, and maybe more in general for, I think she's asking political prisoners. This is an open question, so any of you.
Can I take it? I think, just keep talking about it. That's important. Even if you talk on your social media, even if you talk, write somewhere in your own blog or whatever. Others are also, many people are also writing about these cases. Like I said, I mean, people talking about it, people keeping the chatter alive, people keeping the voices alive. That's what strengthens this thing, because what they're doing this primarily is to silence all of us, and intimidate us into silence. If we refuse to be silent, then they lose. The half battle is won there. So just keep talking about it.
My answer was going to be the same as Bruno's. I think, especially using social media, it is a good platform. And I think it's important to create this counter narrative, because I think Indian authorities are putting a lot of effort, at least, in creating these narratives around people. And they've done the same for Umar. They created this narrative that he's a terrorist, that he's engaging in sedition. So when you are doing the opposite on social media, when you're reposting, you can post your own content or you can repost from other content. You are helping create a counter narrative that this is not who Umar is or what his case is about. So it's really important in that sense. And I think social media is a good tool to help, that we can all access it to create this counter narrative.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Does anyone have other questions? Please drop them in the chat. Otherwise,
there is a question in the Q&A that when listening to the speeches of Umar Khalid, he emphasizes his faith in the Constitution of India. What explains his strong and enduring conviction in it, despite its perceived shortcomings in protecting the minorities and marginalized communities? I think it's a very good question, and I think either of you can take it, please.
I mean, I keep getting this question actually. Yeah, I keep getting this question with a rider also, that how come you still believe in the judiciary? So my standing response is that, we were fighting for the constitution. We were fighting for democracy. And judiciary, the media, the executive, everything is part of democracy, is what makes democracy what it is. And we cannot lose hope on democracy. It's our fight to strengthen democracy. Just because the people in power right now are liquidating democracy, just because they are one after the other institutions of the government of India right now are falling, be it the judiciary or even the election commission or executive, police, public prosecution. They were supposed to stand with the people. They were supposed to stand with truth. But just because these few people and a few judges in the judiciary are failing to stand by justice, by truth, doesn't mean that we negate the whole constitution. We have a beautiful constitution which can be improved upon, but it should not be given upon or liquidated. That's what they are trying to do. That's what the fascists are trying to do. Our job is to believe in this constitution and improve upon it. Make the boundaries of the constitution even broader, make the boundaries of democracy even broader. So during the CAA, that actually was the first people's movement in India which kept the constitution so central. And after 4 years, when the general election happened, that is when the opposition started talking about the constitution. But it started with the CAA movement and the movement fought by the farmers of this country, that constitution and rule of law, these were kept in the center of discourse. And we were all part of that fight. And for us, the fight for constitution continues. We don't give up on that. So the fascists are liquidating the constitution. We believe in the constitution even more than ever.
Thanks a lot, Buno. I see another question.
Yeah, we have 2 other questions in the chat.
Yeah, Elena, please go ahead, take them.
Thank you, Ritu. So Mani is asking if there's a document on Umar's case that we can circulate to catch the interest of people and to keep the case alive. We have, maybe I can answer from our work, the Diaspora in Action for Human Rights and Democracy. We have put some information and the joint statement on our website. And also Human Rights Foundation, but maybe Hannah, and also Betwa and Bono, if you want to answer.
It's a good question. I think, yeah, Hrefs, if you go to Href's Twitter account or social media, we have posted repeatedly about his case, and some of these posts contain details about his case that you can repost. I think recently we did a video with Umar's father, where he's talking to Umar about the case. I'll put it in the chat. That could be something that you repost. Yeah.
I think one of the sort of things that stands out about this case is actually a case which has been heavily reported on, right? I don't think cases get this kind of examination. But the fact that, we were able to access the charge sheets, and it is very unusual for this level of arguments on merits to take place, at least in the Indian system, at the stage of bail, right? There are very minimal arguments which happened. But here, the bail hearings itself have almost been argued like a trial. So there is a lot of information which has actually just got reported by the media, and people have, and the reason why I think that reporters and journalists are able to, say that there's something wrong with this case is because they have actually studied the case, not just, the prosecution said this and the defense said this. So I mean, I would just sort of also recommend it. I know Article 14, where I work, we've done a lot of extensive coverage of the arguments which have taken place. We've done very detailed analysis, and it's all very user friendly. It's basically written like, easily reported pieces. A lot of other independent media organizations have done this, other than what, the regular news which which the national dailies and live law and some of these websites cover. This is a really very well covered case. So not by the mainstream media, by the alternative media. Like I said, Article 14 has done a lot of work, but also a lot of other independent media organizations have really, really looked and done a deep dive. And I think that's why, because even when you have judge after judge sort of coming out and saying that, that agreeing with the state, it kind of gives you that moment of, am I getting this wrong, right? But I think the fact that we've been able to study the charge sheet and the evidence and the way it's written and all of this is not, like I was saying, it goes beyond Umar, right? Like, how can this be the quality of investigation of the largest democracy in the world? Like, that is really, really appalling to me. Is this how the police work? Is this how the police investigate? Anyway, sorry, I've in a roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of reported material on this.
Thank you, and I've also put in the chat the link to our newsletter, which has one edition explaining the January edition of our newsletter explains Umar case, and the latest edition has our joint statement and op-ed. So it's in the chat. Then we have another question. We assume that people in the judiciary are people with intellect and good conscience. I feel they are in front of the government or administration, that they have to be against one single citizen. Again, it's an open question. One of you would like
Sorry,
to
I
answer.
didn't quite catch that. Could you say that again, Eleanor?
Yeah, it's we assume that people in judiciary are people with good conscience. How filled are they in front of government or administrations that they have to be against one single citizen?
I think in Indian terms, we basically call this playing to the lobby, right? In the the Supreme Court. So I think that's where the question is coming from. So either of you can take it.
But I don't think it's against one citizen. I mean, we are having a discussion about Umar Khalid today, but there are 17, 18 accused in this case. And there are many, many other UAPA cases in which people are unjustly incarcerated. There are also many, many non UAPA cases, NSA cases, just cases even under regular penal provisions. Which are unjust and clearly unjust, and they continue to be prosecuted for a very long time, and it takes forever for people to get bail. So I don't think it's just I think it's a very systemic problem, and it goes way beyond Umar Khalid.
I can chime in on this as well. So this is definitely part of the reason why, as HRF, we decided to engage, because it's in this case, but as Betwa said, also in other cases, that we see that the judiciary is not doing its role of, checking the government. That's the core power that the judiciary has, is that it can, go against the government. And in this case, the police produced all of this evidence that Betwa set out that, is, if you actually look at it, is really thin. There is almost nothing there. It's a collection of different things that are unrelated. So if there was a real judge and they would have looked at this, I think Umar would have been out on bail long time ago, or the case would have already been dismissed. So in this case, it's really clear that judiciary is failing. And I think in those cases, it's important to, India is not a country yet that, the space is totally closed. So I think it's important to keep pressuring the judiciary to do its role. But then in addition to that, I think it is important to engage with the international community, because the domestic remedies are clearly not working. So we need to think about other things that we can do in such a case.
And the Delhi High Court, in fact, if you look at the Delhi High Court bail order giving bail to Devangna and Natasha, two of Umar's co-accused, that was a judiciary getting it right. But that was just all, like I said, it was very short-lived. And I think it came just as such a huge shock to the police and the prosecution that, in fact, the one of the judges who denied Umar bail was a judge, ironically enough, who granted bail to Devangna and Natasha. So it's all very strange. But I think the narrative here is also shifted from, blaming the executive to actually taking the now more and more taking the judiciary to task. Not just in terms of unjust prosecutions, but also generally the state of the nation, right? Like the rising Islamophobia, the crimes against minorities, the bulldozing of Muslim homes, and just many acts of human rights violations which are going on, which the judiciary has completely failed to rein in the executive. The max that they can do is, after 4 or 5 years have passed, just dole out some bail. So that's what the judiciary is doing, and not much more than that. And that's also not a guarantee.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. And I'm looking at the time, and I also think it's kind of late in India, so maybe we can wrap it up. I would like to thank you, all of you, all the attendees, specifically the speakers, on behalf of Diaspora in Action for Human Rights and Democracy. And to end on a positive note, I think we're all gonna keep fighting. So thank you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.